Well, from tomorrow until the 26th of this month, South Africa will all be observing National Water Week. It's observed under the theme Accelerating Change. Here's a problem for me, though. Despite the recent heavy rains in parts of our country, many areas still have taps that are running dry. How is that even possible? Well, luckily, I have water expert Professor Anthony Turton, very kind to give me some of his time this afternoon. Prof, hello to you and welcome back to eNCA. So how is that even possible? Because we've had so much rain, still so many areas don't have enough water. How did we get here? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and the listeners. A very seductive question, that one. The short answer is infrastructure. It's all about infrastructure. So we've got to get the water out of the river and out of the dam through pipes and pumps into treatment plants and then into reservoirs and then into people's homes and then capture all of the wastewater to come back and treat it again. And all of that is about infrastructure. So the bottom line is South Africa's infrastructure is failing. We know about the Eskom case, and we also now increasingly know about our sewage and our water situation. Eskom and water are two sides of exactly the same coin.
No, they are, and I think this is what caught many people and many metros off guard when we were dealing with the stage 6 power cuts, that water in their areas were also water treatment plants and reservoirs weren't working. So the two are tied in very closely. So how can we then, Prof, talk about accelerating change when we're not able to fix the issues of old? Where would you begin?
Well, we are accelerating change at the moment, but unfortunately it's change in the wrong direction. It's in an undesirable direction. So, I mean, that's the reality. We are seeing an acceleration in the destruction of our infrastructure. And you must appreciate that engineered systems are designed on certain parameters, and they're based on certain assumptions. And those assumptions are very, very important. And the one assumption is that there's a steady state of energy in the system. In other words, that there will, in fact, be electricity available for the pumps, etc. That is a design assumption. So once that is no longer there, then your entire design is no longer viable, because your design ultimately comes down to certain other parameters, and that is about how much water must be kept in the system in redundant supply to act as a backup in the case of a shock to the system. And typically that's 48 hours. So you get the total population in the area, and you do a calculation how much is needed for 48 hours of backup, assuming there's a constant supply of electricity. So now we have a number of variables there. The one is that the energy is not available. But the second one, of course, now is that the infrastructure is no longer available because we're losing over 40% of the water in the system to leaks, etc. So the volume we thought was there is not there. And then the other huge thing is that since 1994, there's been no control over the movement of people. So therefore, a huge number of people have moved to the urban areas. So the demand for water has increased exponentially. And there's never, ever, in the last 2.5 decades, there's never, ever been any planning over an increase in the demand. It just has not happened. So that's where we are. These things come together and creates what we would now call a perfect storm.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, it doesn't sound like there's much space for hope here, Prof, but is there? Because we know the water leak issue is a major issue. That's been a big problem down in Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, and they're talking about their water leaks they've got down there. So where do you begin? Which one do you go after first? The blackouts, the load shedding is perhaps beyond the ambit of anybody working with water, but the leaks perhaps we could look at. Where would you begin if someone said to you, Prof, all right, you're in charge, what's the first thing you would do?
Well, if I was in charge, I think the first thing that I would do is I would prioritize all of my infrastructure, and critical parts of infrastructure I would immediately put on standby generator systems. In other words, backup hardwired standby generators. Yes, they're expensive, but at least you're going to keep your critical infrastructure going. That's the first step, and to my great surprise, that hasn't actually happened even to this day. Then the second thing that I would start doing now is wage a huge campaign against the leaks, because it doesn't make sense to put more water in the system if you're simply losing that water. We lose a total, if you take all the bits and pieces together, of around about 50% of the water that goes into the system gets lost at different points in time, different contributors along the way. So it's a huge problem. Then, of course, the third thing is that improvement of inefficiencies, efficiency of demand, efficiency of water use, quite easy to do. Doesn't make sense to flush your toilet with drinking quality water. So you just capture your shower water and use it to flush the toilet. So if we use every single unit of water in the country 1.6 times by 2035, we're not going to have a water constrained economy. It's really not rocket science.
It's not rocket science yet. It seems so difficult to actually get right. And when we talk about the perfect storm that you alluded to earlier, imagine then we were on the precipice, like we are with the blackouts. Many people are suggesting we could see a total grid collapse. Eskom saying it won't happen. Prof, I'm sure you know the argument. It won't happen. But are we anywhere near a water collapse? I'm trying to find a fancier way of saying that. Are we near a day zero nationally in our country?
I think as with both water and energy, without any question of doubt, we are close to a point of collapse. However, let me just give that a caveat. The caveat is that in the case of the electricity system, it's designed to not collapse the total grid. So in other words, you will get partial collapse of portions of the grid, so that some of the grid will still stay alive. So that's fine if you're in that part of the grid that works, that's great. But if you're in a different part that's shut down, you could be shut down for 2 weeks at a time. That's the one thing. Now, the same thing happens with water. So, for example, you might be in the city of Cape Town and you'd have one set of problems, which might be different from the city of Johannesburg or the city of Tshwane, etc. So each of these metros have got their own challenges.
Oh dear, Prof, I hope I haven't lost you. I'm going to give it a second, Prof, to see if your signal maybe comes back. Professor Anthony Turton with us talking about what's going to be a very important week as far as National Water Week, which is going to be commencing from tomorrow until the 26th. I'm afraid it looks like, Prof, your Zoom has actually frozen us. I'll tell you what, we'll leave it there. We've certainly got the gist of what the issues are. The leaks in our water infrastructure is a problem. Up to 50% of the water we do have available that is in the system, I'm afraid we actually lose. Prof, I'm sorry, my team telling me you're actually back with us. Let me come back so you can finish your thought. You were talking about the collapse of the grid electricity-wise, and we lost you as you were getting into the grid or the collapsing possibly of our water system. Please continue.
Yes, so the water, you must appreciate that the water system is designed to have pressure on it the whole time. It's not designed to be turned on and off. Once again, one of those engineering assumptions. So once you start losing pressure, you start getting an accelerated failure. So one failure leads more rapidly to another failure, etc. So you've got to start off by restoring some kind of grid stability. That stability is of vital importance, and then you got to rebuild from that moment in time. But without any question of doubt, our economy is water and energy and capital constrained now. Those are the three major constraints to our national economy. And unless we get these things right at the highest level of strategic planning in the country, I would even say at the highest level of national security planning. This is all these things combined to form national security significance. So unless we get it right there, then all the little piecemeal Mickey Mouse committees that we're putting together and task teams and intergovernmental ministerial port, whatever, these things are really just the Band-Aid over the problem. You've got to understand the fundamental nature of this problem. And this problem is that South Africa has a water, energy and capital constrained economy, period. Full stop. That's what we have. What are we going to do about that?
Yeah, what are we going to do about it as well if it's all gone one day as well? Let's not forget how important water is, and it's a resource that can't be automatically replaced at a good enough quality level. Prof, last question to you then. You mentioned about security here, and that just made me think, as I say goodbye to you, we've now seen under the national state of disaster, the army, for example, deployed to various power stations to stop theft and the stealing of copper cable and power utilities that they need to try and keep up and running. Would you want to see something like that for our water infrastructure? Does our water infrastructure get targeted the same as our electricity infrastructure? Can you draw a comparison?
No, look, I've had experience with the Mfuleni sewage crisis when the SANDF was deployed there. I was brought in by the General Officer commanding the engineering formation, part of a task team of people that did a reconnaissance along the whole system. And well, we know from that 2 billion rand later, the SANDF was incapable of making the slightest impact on the sewage problem there. So no, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is national security. National security is this water, energy, and capital constraint poses an existential crisis to the stability of the state, in fact, to the sovereign integrity of the state. This is not about deploying the army. This is about understanding that the security of the state in terms of social cohesion, political cohesion, investment destination, etc. This is what I'm talking about.
Prof, and I appreciate your time as well. While we are going into National Water Week, it should ordinarily be something we should celebrate. But as Prof. Anthony Turton has made it very, very clear to us, it's not necessarily something to celebrate, it's something to work on. Prof, thank you very much indeed for your time. I'm sure we'll touch base again later this week, joining us here on eNCA.